Hello again. We are on the review rampage, and I am Drumboy Reed Slow, and I got a flagship name here. It kind of goes without saying. You'll know every single one of the main characters before I can even tell you who they are. Today's review, based on the entirety of the run, is going to be Uncanny X-Men. I haven't done Marvel yet, to be honest with you. Marvel and their parent company have been getting a lot of grief lately, and for good reason. To say that they've been missing the mark on a lot of books, to say that they've admitted to business practices that basically reflect random ideas, mixing it up and throwing it at the wall, seeing if it sticks, and if it doesn't, another cancellation. There's even talk that I haven't gotten to it yet, but there's even talk that this From the Ashes era, this reset that I'm going to be spotlighting, isn't even the best X title, nor the adjectiveless X-Men title as well. There was a 5-issue series that was supposed to go on longer. That was the X-Men we were all hoping for. I'll get to that review eventually. But right now we're talking flagship X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, I apologize, by Gail Simone. We got I know his last name's Marquez. On the art, David Marquez on the art, and this could be one of my first negative reviews. You'd have to be living under a rock to try and tell me you never heard of the X-Men. X-Men are pop culture icons. We all know the X-Men. All of us Gen X and millennials. Not every alumni of the X-Men is as popular as the next, but here we have 5 of the most popular. But as Marvel has shown us several times, even the most popular character can flop if the execution is wrong. So this is a pretty big title we got here, and we have to ask, is it actually good? Jumping in on first impressions here, issue 1. I didn't really know what to do with what I had. I hadn't followed the Krakoa era. I actually hadn't followed X-Men in a very long time. My experience with the X-Men was the era back in the 80s, I believe right around the Dark Phoenix saga, or the Phoenix saga in general, was kind of where I started, and I have just started to, or back then anyway, I had just gotten to when X Factor began. And so I would have to say most X-Men fans would agree I was reading the golden era, and the true golden era. And at least I think my generation would think that. And to say that the first issue totally missed the mark would be disingenuous. I definitely remember the magic, introduction of magic to the X-Men, and that was a little bit out of the the normal realm of just mutants versus humans and the social affairs. So I guess the fact that there was a big dragon, magical dragon, as the first villain in this very first arc didn't totally take me out of it, but that it just felt like an introductory issue. And for a first issue, I felt like I was just getting plunged into a random episode smack dab in the middle of like a TV series. It just moved a little fast for me, and I'm not sure that Gail Simone's dialogue, as much as I liked certain aspects of the story, I'm not sure her delivery on the dialogue was genuine. As the story progresses to issue 2, we are also introduced to 4 new characters, teenagers with mutant abilities. They come upon the X-Men. There's a short scuffle. They're retreating from some kind of threat. They refer to this threat as a she. They're being chased, and they sought out the X-Men, at least this band of the X-Men, which consists of Gambit, Nightcrawler, Rogue, Jubilee, and Wolverine. They've sought out the X-Men for help, and it ends up being like a scuffle. And our flagship X-Men, they obviously win, but they also recognize that these young mutants have some intense potential, and they are also like, wow, for kids. I think they're all like around the age of 16, but they're introduced. They're the Outliers. You got Ransom, who apparently he doesn't have a heart, and his power is to take attacks in him, and then he gives it back. And then there's Jitter, who she seems to have like this watch, and she can do anything, hyper focus, like super Adderall or something. I shouldn't have said that. But the ability essentially gives her the ability to do anything. She can move super fast, execute an immaculate skill perfectly that she shouldn't even know. It's actually a really interesting power, but it also, once it's drained, she's out for a second. And so the timing factor, this power is really good for the storytelling in the battles, because it gives them kind of like an advantage and then a disadvantage. But she's still, so you got Jitter, and then there's Death Dream, a little goth kid who's he's very obsessed with dark things, and he can basically make somebody see horrors that just completely overwhelm them. He also seems to be able to die whenever he wants, and seems to crave that feeling. And then you got Calico, who doesn't even initially know she's a mutant, but she seemingly can generate a horse with like flame mane, like a fire mane, and an ability to like fly, and she wields a sword. She's really cool. She's really cute. They're interesting. The kids are cute. They all got funny moments. They're endearing. It kind of gives me like New Mutants vibes. I definitely remember reading New Mutants and Uncanny side by side, and wow, that was a great experience for those issues that interlaced. And so what we ultimately have is this combining of what the Outliers and the existing X-Men in this group, because there's another group of X-Men, and they're kind of they work with each other, but they're also kind of at odds with each other. But we'll get to that in the next review. With this, the obvious thing is that they eventually kind of cave, and they take these kids in, and kind of create their own version of a scaled down danger room. And each of the kids ends up having like a direct mentor. So with Ransom, he has Wolverine. To be honest with you, I'm gonna have to look back in the book to see how the rest of them break down. But it's cool. I can't say that I initially liked the idea that the young kids, the young twerps being involved. But to be honest with you, they all grew on me. They have their own age group drama, and then the adults have their own age group drama. So there's love interests going on and all that stuff. this is definitely feels like X-Men in that sense, that there's, the sense of romance, there's the sense of not fitting in the world, there's the social aspects. That stays strong. I'll give Gail credit for taking lots of chances. The ride definitely goes up and down. And my main takeaway, before I get into like the more intricate points and come up with a rating here, my main takeaway was stocking them up and reading all the issues, in a row, kind of going back and forth with the other X-Men title for the events, but kind of sticking just to one at a time. That sequential read saved this title for me. It kind of gave me a chance to warm up to Gail's style better, just kind of flowing from one issue to the next and keeping the momentum. This book is going to get a lower rating on the individual issue aspect. I think that I can actually say that for both of the main X-Men titles, but it found its strength in being the entire run. And I can honestly say, because she's got momentum and she's got progress, I'm glad that it appears that when this, in 2026, when this picks back up, I think we got 21 issues here right now, and now we're in the Age of Revelation, and so that's like a kind of like a side canon thing going on. The decision by Marvel to have Gail continue to be the head writer of this, I'm glad it's happening, because I've endeared this book to myself, but this is not, going to be your strongest X-Men title. This is not going to be on the same level as the Claremont years, but we have gotten hints of it, and I'm going to give it credit for the lack of predictability. On my end, I could not see it turning out this way, but I am glad I got introduced to 4 new characters that I ended up really being I'm protective of them. I don't want them to get killed off, so I'm hoping that they'll be in future X-Men titles. And usually I don't like the new X-Men. I'm usually like skeptical. Death's Dream is a little bit, whatever. Ransom seems kind of like a little bit lazy in terms of like his power, but the other two really that definitely with the horse thing, there's a little bit of like something going on with that, and that's an interesting arc with her name's Calico. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier. And then Jitter with the, like I said, the timing thing with the battles, that really added an element for me. So I really liked how they clashed with the main X-Men, but the villains and some of the settings, and sometimes it didn't really even feel like an X book. It felt more like just a Marvel Universe book, because the execution was done in such a way that if you didn't know anything about the X-Men, this book would give you a completely different idea versus what exists in the past. But I have to say, I'll commend Gail for it. I'll commend David Marquez for his excellent art. It's mostly consistent. They didn't have a lot of sit-in artists for, maybe an issue here or there, but it usually worked. And overall, I think that we're gonna wind up on the at least higher than 5, maybe around 6 or 7. But let's see how the score breaks down. So, as a reminder of my new scoring criteria, we're gonna go ahead and award up to 2 points for readability based on the overall, all the whole run. As a sequential read, and then we're going to talk about readability on an individual basis. That's kind of like, an average of what each individual comic feels like if that was the only one you read. We're going to talk about up to 2 points. Oh, I'm sorry, that was 1 point. Up to 1 point for the individual. And then we got up to 2 points for art, up to 1 point for the cover art, which I can already tell you that's going to get a decent mark. And then 1 point for the coloring, another decent mark. I'm thinking. We're also going to look at up to 2 points for the aspect of like the character building and the world building and how that relates to the effectiveness of the story. And then we're gonna do one last point for, okay, does this project have legs? Do I want to see more? And so that comes up to about 10 points. So let's get into it. Getting into the overall readability of the entire run as we have it so far. A big part of this is going to actually depend on your warmth towards Rogue, other than thinking she's hot, obviously, but your warmth towards Rogue and seeing a lot of the story read through her way of dialect, and also Remy LeBeau and his way of dialect, because a lot of the story is narrated through their thought bubbles. And like I said, you know, she gets, I'm not sure if she actually gets better. I'm not, you know, but Gail Simone, sometimes it doesn't come off as popular, but almost like she's trying too hard to make it look genuine. That said, you still got your five popular X-Men. Basically, if the dialogue isn't perfect, one combined with the panels and their behaviors and their decisions, you got the X-Men. She gets that far. David Marquez makes it, they combine to get that done. And so I'm, Gail Simone, while she doesn't exactly nail the mark, she does give you the X-Men experience. Now, the individual settings that they wind up in, that is the question. How much X-Men have you read to make yourself, feel comfortable with this? Or maybe it's going to repel you. I don't know. But for me, the more issues I read in a row, the further I got into the series, the stronger it became. I think I was more into the interrelationship of the X-Men themselves than I was actually with how their actual battles with the villains. I was more interested, and I think that's kind of the point of the X-Men. So I'm gonna have to give Gail for her ability to get me to enjoy the reading experience. I'm gonna do 1.75. So yeah, I mean, just a little shy of perfect. Individually, the readability, I don't know if I ever truly escaped the feeling that I was being plunged into the middle of a series and the characters were just, acting like they always acted, and it was me that had to play catch up. I'm not a big fan of the individual aspect. It definitely would feel like if I picked up any random issue that they were kind of milking the story and trying to get me to buy 3 issues instead of 1. So I'm going to go ahead and give the individual issue aspect probably a 0.25. So now we're at a full 2 points for a possible 3. When it comes to the art, David Marquez absolutely nails it. This is exactly how I picture the X-Men looking, art-wise. His depiction of every character just absolutely brings them to life in the way that they're supposed to look, the way that the actual words describing the scenes make you think they would act. For that, I have to give this book a perfect 2 out of the possible 2 for David Marquez's artwork. Uncanny X-Men covers look their best when they depict a little bit of what you're going to see when you open the book. Those kind of covers tell a story and definitely beat out simple covers that just feature the team in a cool pose. Like many celebrated eras of X-Men, even though this era might not be the most celebrated, there are plenty of covers that bring to life the exact kind of excitement you're going to see once you open up. But I'd say the kind of classic, iconic feeling type of covers we know Uncanny for only make up about half the issues on the cover A's. And yeah, you got your variants and all, but, you know, for me, I base this all off the cover A's, you know, the one that we're supposed to think is the main cover. And I think you can already kind of see a theme. A lot of the covers started to kind of feel the same on some of the issues, but we definitely had some that were definite keepers. I was pretty driven to give this a comic a chance based on some of the covers. I'll admit that much. I'm going to go ahead, since it was about half of them that I really liked, I'm going to go ahead and give it a 1 out of a half point out of the possible 1 point. When it comes to the coloring, I'd be very surprised, to say the least, if I ever saw an X-Men title where the coloring wasn't bright and full of lots of contrasting and multiple colors. It's just a staple of X-Men comics, in my opinion, especially Uncanny. 1 out of 1. Have you been keeping up with the score? Right now, we're standing at 5.5 points out of a possible 7. Now on to character development and world building. So we got Rogue, Gambit, Wolverine, Kurt, and Jubilation. New characters Jitter, Ransom, Death Dream, and Calico. So with these characters, like I said before, that's one of the best aspects of the entire series. So right now is their interaction with each other and the relationships they're building within. That makes up about 75% of what makes this an excellent book if you're an X-Men fan. And with the, for example, with the, like, you know, the outliers, you know, they're the new characters, they're the young ones, they're the ones finding themselves, but in reality, there is just as much character building, or an attempt to at least build the relationships with the older X-Men. They're still, you know, hanging on to old flames or old feelings. I mean, there's just so much of that going on with the adults, just as much as, you know, you have, I'm not spoiling anything by this, but you have, Calico and Jitter, the two, girls, they slowly, you know, develop feelings for each other. And I mean, at first I was like, oh, we're gonna do that? Okay, well, that's all right. But I mean, after a while, I mean, Jitter, you know, she's just like a nervous teenage boy, you know, around a pretty girl. It's very endearing. You know, I you know, I didn't really appreciate, after actually reading, you know, how all the X-Men and the new characters interacted with each other. I didn't appreciate that I'd seen reviews where they were like, oh, you know, Gail Simone is making it, you know, she's pushing a message or an agenda, and I didn't really get that. It wasn't, and none of the relationships, none of the characters, you know, have developing romantic feelings of any sort. I think Ransom becomes romantically involved with Tempest, who's over on the other X-Men team, or one of the other X-Men teams. The book that didn't get canceled, the other X-Men book that didn't get canceled. So I mean, like, there's a lot of young love going on, and that honestly is one of the reasons that the pages, you know, got easy to turn, is the interrelationships. You know, you were rooting for them. You were rooting for them to be happy, to feel like they were finally accepted, and that was cool. I'd also say that, like, for like Calico, she's got maybe it's like a traumatic past. I mean, they all seem to have traumatic past, but she has a traumatic past, or a troubled relationship with her mom, I believe. And the thing with the horse, she doesn't know she's a mutant, and then she ends up being the most enthusiastic to finally realize she's a mutant. You know, there's a lot going on with the characters. it's the world building outside of the characters. I feel like the villains are all kind of gimmicky. The whole Dark Artery 4-parter, you know, Gale ends up building up this little story about this woman from the past, and I mean, it was like okay, but like I want to get back to, you know, over to the X-Men and see what they're doing. I didn't really need to know much because it never really felt like the world that they were in was really significant, or even though, you know, they would be in danger, or you'd even be worried that one of the characters was going to get killed off. You know, I had the suspicion that the Outliers were just brought in to kill off at certain points. So when that you know, little story was going off, I mean, that was maybe like the one thing that was where I felt like dire consequences, or dire like there was actual risk involved. But otherwise, it always felt like I was just watching the mutants intermingle and grow together as a team, more so than, you know, actually be in any situation where there was true stakes. So for world building, it's a 0, but I think for the actual character development, it's a 1. So we'll give it a 1 out of the possible 2. Putting us at 7.5 out of 9. All right. Does this comic have legs? Yeah, I'm happy that I'm happy it's going forward. I'm happy that at very least Gail Simone. I'm not sure if David Marquez is going to remain on the book, but I am okay and at peace with the fact that Gail's going to continue this. So we're going to go ahead and give that a 1, putting us at an 8.5 out of 10. And I'd say that seems a little high, but remember, this got high marks for being sequentially read and has a really good art. So that really ends up, you know, bridging the gap. But I'd basically, if I had to guess, you know, before applying things to my scoring system, I would have guessed you know, like a 7 out of 10 is what I'd add up to. And this feels like a C+ book. So I'm going to go ahead and give it, we'll give it a range. We're going to give it a 7 to an 8.5 out of 10 from me. And we're, you know, if you want to handicap that with, you know, a little bit of cynicism, you know, go ahead and put it at a 6, but don't hit it at a 5. I feel like as a 6, it's something that an X-Men fan should read, but they should read it sequentially so they get the full effect. All right, everyone, that's my review. Please give me a like and subscribe. I hope you're enjoying these. I'm gonna keep doing them. I love doing them. Thank you so much if you got this far, and please hit me with a comment if you are you know, you got any suggestions, or if you think there's any books I'm missing out on. We're just getting started. I got a lot more titles I'm catching up on. I got them already in my possession. Let's do it. Let's figure out what's good and what stays on the shelf. All right, later.